I'm your host, Roma Richardson, and I'm so pleasured? Anyways, I'm pleased to have you join me this evening on this Tuesday in May. I'm excited for this conversation that we're about to have tonight, but as usual, before we get into tonight's topic, I'm going to give you all a little break to gather the troops, let everybody know that Pleasure Pulse is live. So we'll pause for a short break and then we'll come right back and get straight into tonight's conversation.
Join us every Wednesday for In Focus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. In Focus, your government, your business.
Grace be to you and the peace be multiplied from God the Father and our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Hi, I'm Jazzy D.
And I am Paul Diswingate. And we are blessed to be hosting the Sound of Praise,
Our early morning gospel program right here on ZIZ Radio.
It's a morning of great music, inspirational features, and the uncompromised Word of God, which is basic instruction before leaving earth, and much more.
Join me, Jazzy D.
And join me, Paul D. Springate, from 3 to 6 in the morning for the Sound of Praise. Hallelujah!
My hallelujah belongs to you.
Hi, welcome back to Pleasure Pulse. You're tuned in to ZIZ Radio, ZIZ Facebook, ZIZ on YouTube, and ZIZ online on ZIZ's website, if that's the way that you choose to connect with us tonight. So this evening I'm joined by a multi-visiting, multiple time
Regular now.
regular, yeah, I was gonna say multiple Grammy Award winning guest here with me tonight, Andrea Watley. You can introduce or reintroduce for folks who maybe have not.
Okay, good night to everyone who is listening and viewing. My name is Andrea Watley from 3C's Counseling Services, and I'm happy to be here with Roma again tonight.
Happy to have you. Always a pleasure. So tonight we're talking about mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness,
Yes.
or Mental Health Month.
Mm-hmm.
And you reached out, or you mentioned that you wanted to come back again to have this conversation. And we kind of we've been, every time you've been here, we've talked about some aspect of mental health. So we're going to go into another aspect and another thing that connects sexual health and mental health. So tonight we're talking about casual sex and the mental health impacts of it. So let's start with, I suppose, a definition so that we are clear.
So we throw around the terms casual dating. Sometimes you hear people say, I'm casually dating. And then we hear about casual sex. And I think sometimes we mix the two. And it's important for us to understand what casual dating is and what casual sex is. So casual dating is when someone dates with the intention of maintaining some sort of relationship. Whereas casual sex is just a one-off thing. It's not like our intentions are not to create a relationship. So it's the knocking up, the one night stand, the hit and run. I know that's the most recent slang now. So that's the difference. Yeah. What have you been?
I don't know. Wow, I've never.
Really?
No, I have not heard that. That's the.
Yeah, that's a new slang amongst the younger, the
like
teens
Gen
and the
Z.
young adults.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm a millennial, and I have not heard any millennials.
So you're out there.
Hit
You're
and
right.
run.
Yeah.
Wow. But I also read that casual sex could be like friends with benefits and.
Because there's no plan, there is no intention of having a romantic relationship.
Okay.
So that's where the difference lies. So you find we have persons within our society who are having more casual sex. And we may ask, who are those persons? Well, according to the studies, our teens and our young adults are the ones who engage more in casual sex, and also those who are university students or college students. So that's where we are.
Okay, so more of like, hookup culture.
Yes.
I mean, we don't really say that necessarily.
We don't say that anymore.
Yeah, but that's essentially connects with it. So you have the friends with benefits, you have the one night stands, you have the hit and run. You have, because I also looked it up, and it also included like sex with sex workers as part of like casual sex. So we have the definition there. Once the intention is not to move towards a romantic relationship or to establish a romantic relationship, but there's sex involved, it's probably,
and it's also consensual.
Yes,
so it's
of
important
course
that we know that it's consensual sex and not something coerced or forced.
Okay, so both people agree.
Yes, both people agree that. Okay, so let's put casual sex into context now. Right? Some persons would consider casual sex as a healthy sexual outlet. Just like how they exercise, that's how some people view it. Some persons will find it to be an enjoyable physical experience, or some persons, they do it because they don't want to be held accountable, or they don't want to have those expectations as a romantic relationship, right? So that's the perspective that we are speaking about casual sex from. Okay, some persons use it as well to help manage their emotions, but this is where it gets complicated. Sometimes you will hear someone say, or they would have previously left a romantic relationship, and because of the stress or the heartache associated with that past experience, they then participate in casual sex as a means of improving their emotions. But there is a drawback to that in attempting to use sex to manage your emotions, because sex can be used just like any other drug.
Yeah,
like we use alcohol, we use other illicit drugs, or we do anything in excess just to soak away our emotions.
Yeah,
and
instead of
casual
having
sex
to
is
deal with
one
them.
of them.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, let's
So,
talk about this
yeah,
because I
so-
feel like a lot of times, like when you're in a relationship, or when the relationship ends and your friends and so see you going through it, sometimes the advice is you just need to
The
find
recommendation
somebody.
is that, and let me
Yeah.
tell you why persons recommend it without recognizing the implications of that recommendation, because we have to be mindful that when we make the decision, especially when it comes to engaging in sex is a really powerful thing, and we have to be conscious of that. And the reason why some persons resort to sex for all the different reasons that I mentioned earlier is because it truly makes shifts or does transforming for the person, and it goes right back to the brain. Sexual encounters, what it does, it rewires your brain. So for the teenagers, for the young adults, for the college students, these are the persons who are more prone to stress, anxiety, depression, because they're coming about in life and there's a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty. And so what that does with the sexual encounters, now there's an imprint now on your brain as to that encounter, because sex is not just like going to pick mangoes. A connection is being forged, although the intention is not to forge a connection is forged because our memories retain the experience. Okay, so it's very important that we be mindful of that. Sometimes too, most times the studies will show that women have a harder time having casual sex than men, because women tend to forge an attachment, whereas men, they don't forge the attachment as quickly as a woman. And that is because of our biological makeup, and it goes back to the brain and how our brains function. Yep.
Interesting. But of course, that does not mean that all women
No, it
cannot
does.
have successfully have casual
So-
sex, or that all men either
Correct.
can only, because there are some men too, you know, who have
They do
talked
get
about
connected.
feeling used
Yeah.
and, you know, they want more and
So
things
then
like
that goes back to because casual sex, we have to be mindful that these acts are individual based. So although the studies will show this, it's still on an individual basis, right? And then there are other factors that are at play when it comes to the different studies. So when persons, but before we go there, I want to just speak to the impact of the media on what sex is. We know, especially in our culture, sex is deemed, it's very sacred, so it's conformed to a relationship, to a marriage. But when we talk about casual sex, it's not so much so. A good thing, because for us, we don't understand it to be something like you could just do it for fun, right? And the reason for that is because mentally, some persons are not prepared to deal with the implications of just doing it for doing its sake as a casual way, and that is what we have to be mindful of. But recently the media has now introduced more so the right, or the rite of passage for you to be able to engage in having casual sex with the friends with benefits. You see that a lot now, because persons would have gone through different experiences and not wanting to deal with the whole commitment and being accountable and having to answer to someone. So the friends with benefits came, hey, I could just get my pleasure and then move on, right? But to every benefit, there's still a disadvantage or a shortcoming. So it's like a matching. You have your casual sex, or it feels good, it's pleasurable, you learn different experiences, you know, but on the flip side, there are some impacts as well. Some persons come out of it feeling guilty or feeling ashamed, and that goes back to your mental state. What is your belief system? Because if your belief system is already built on, okay, I should have sex with my partner, right? And then you go about having casual sex because of what is already imprinted in your mind. It's like you're now rewiring your mind to do something opposite or contrary to what you know to do, right? So that brings about the anxiety, the developing of a low self-esteem, low self-worth based on that. So it's like there's a counteract. What's your belief system? What's your value system like? Are you able to deal with the ramifications? Are you able to deal with the implications after going about having casual sex?
Yeah.
So currently, like in the media, like I most recently hear persons speaking about bodies, and I was like, you know how much bodies she have, how much bodies he have? I'm like, but we only have one body. I was a whole novice to that term, and I was like, a body, and then they said the body count. I was like, oh, that's what
See, at
you
least
mean.
I knew that. Yeah.
I was like, that's what you mean. And they're like, yes, that's what it means. And so much so sometimes persons start out by, and I'm going to use the example, coming out of a relationship and feel the need to get over, and so they do the whole hookup thing, the one night stand to get it over with. But they find themselves in a deeper hole from just that encounter. And it's not so much to say because of the person or because of that particular experience, but because of the expectation of going in. Because remember, you were in a relationship. Your brain was already wired into forging or having that experience with someone who you're committed to. But just having it, just to get it, yes, it feels good in the moment, but our brain keeps going. Those neurons, those neurotransmitters still keep going through your system, sending out the messages, and they're like, okay, this is something new. So they're trying to get a hold of what has happened. So that's where your mental health now begins to be affected.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said about the deeper hole, because I mean, it took me years upon years upon years to actually acknowledge, to be open to acknowledging whatever feelings it was that at least I was feeling, and being honest about those feelings and dealing with those feelings instead of doing something to, like, you know, chew those feelings or shut them down. Because like when you're in a relationship, like, hopefully for people in relationship, like the kind of sex that they're having with their partners, the kind of care that goes into that, the concern, the interest in mutual pleasure, the aftercare, you know, like the way that your partner, you can lay down and cuddle afterwards, or that they would check in and stuff. When you shift from that, like, to casual sex, and you realize, oh, when the person, when you finish, the person does get up and leave, or they get up and they ask you to leave, and when they see you the next day, they pass you straight on the street, like things like that, like those things really do, you know, because sometimes, as much as, you know, we get up and say, okay, we're going to do the casual sex thing to get over the relationship, a lot of times we're actually still seeking the connection that we had in the relationship, and that's why we're going after that, instead of just, like, you know, sitting with those sad
and that is where
feelings and heartbreak.
That is where the emotional distress comes in, because some people are not able to compartmentalize the romantic longings that they would have had from their previous partner to this person who they are having casual sex with. So that is why you have to be very mindful of the path that you are taking when deciding to take that route. You know, for some persons, the emotions and the touch, it naturally triggers you into wanting to maintain that, into having that experience again. So it's no longer casual, because sometimes you tend to go back down the same path with the same person, and we're saying, okay, there are no strings attached. But in the back of our minds, based on our history, based on our past experience, that is what internally we are really searching for. So then you begin to feel guilty, or you begin to have those expectations and being disappointed when the person who you're having casual sex with is not on the same page. And then you see a lot of things coming out, like, for example, we have, well, the side chick is a term being used now over a decade, but side chick would have started from the standpoint of casual sex. They go out and they get somebody to have sex with, and then that develop over time because our brains, our bodies were not wired. Then it's not wired to just do the one-off thing. Individually, you have to really be prepared to deal with the implications of it.
Okay, so I guess let's talk about. I think you mentioned you wanted to go into something next. Or do you want to go into some of those or more details about those drawbacks?
Okay.
Perhaps.
So the drawbacks now with the emotional distress you find, and more so when it comes to women, they tend to see themselves less than because of the encounters that they would have had. When they are valuing, looking at their self-worth and thinking about the acts, because that's what happens. Whereas with men are wired differently. Men, they are not as emotionally connected to sex as women are. Men, they are driven by what they see, and women are driven by what they feel. And so even in the encounter itself, sometimes women are not finding the pleasure that they were initially seeking when they do that.
Yeah, because
Right.
a lot of men don't do casual sex well. I mean, they don't even do. Sorry.
So because for the men, the idea is to just get the pleasure,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Their
But
pleasure.
their
Yes.
pleasure. But for a woman, the intention is to have that feeling of being of value, right? And even when I was driving home today, I was thinking of it, and sometimes it's bad for us to make comparisons of ourselves to objects, but when we bring those analogies, it really does put things into perspective for us. If we are, and I think somebody did a song, I've heard a song about ride it like a rentier or something along that line, right? But I'm gonna go there.
Wait, like a what?
I'm not sure if I'm quoting the song correctly.
It sounds familiar.
Something about a drive it or ride it like a renty. I mean, I know they've been a rental.
Oh, it's
Right?
a local song?
Yeah, it's one
Oh,
of those soca songs.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, okay, let's say we want to say we are a Ferrari. And we know Ferraris are very expensive vehicles. They value a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone comes and they want to do a test drive in this Ferrari, it will be because they have an intention to buy the Ferrari. But you never hear them say that you have multiple persons test driving the Ferrari. The reason being, from the time you come into the dealership, the dealers are going to assess whether, hey, this person look like a potential buyer. Because if you go in a particular way, there's no way they're going to give you the key to that Ferrari, right? What happens to a person, male or female, when you go down that road of allowing persons to do that test drive because you want to feel the rush, you want to have that experience? Over time, the Ferrari would have been driven so many times. Like, when the buyer now comes, what's going to happen to the buyer when so many persons would have driven that Ferrari? The Ferrari needed maintained. The Ferrari would have needed a complete overhaul.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that happens to us. And I know some persons may feel, and I have it written down here, where you feel that sense of guilt and shame. And it's because it's not even so much so external, but for you, because you want to feel of value. So that is why it's very important that when you prepare to have sex, that mentally you are prepared for whatever the implications are. We have to be mindful of that.
But
Right?
why do we need to devalue like things that have had, like people buy used things? No, I mean, like, why do we need to devalue, or why is people's worth connected to their sexual prowess? It's not even like prowess, but just sexual experience. Like, why is worth connected to that.
So I would say from a professional standpoint, and it goes back to the brain and how your brain is wired based on your experiences. If you're having multiple casual sex partners, then you're teaching your brain to behave in a particular way. So when time comes to have committed an exclusive relationship, it's foreign to your brain. So then what happens, you begin to now search. You might not do it initially, but over time you see the trend. Like, why am I feeling a particular way? It's because your brain is trying to reconfigure itself to this new experience, because this is something new. So it goes back to why do we use that as the measuring stick? It's because it adds to us. It either adds or it takes away. Some persons who would have had a extensive sexual history may be very good at the act now, and would have been able to overcome all those past experiences and have a good relationship with the person who they're committed to now based on those experiences. Whereas some persons may have a challenge in adapting to this new relationship. So it goes back to the individual and your ability to adjust. So it goes back to your mental health, really. How well are you mentally? How mentally prepared are you for this? And so that's why when it comes to our teenagers and our young adults and even our university students, who are the ones who mostly participate in casual sex, or sometimes when persons get intoxicated, they tend to have casual sex. Like, those are the instances that it happened. And you find that after those experiences, they feel good in the moment, but sometimes when persons go back and think about it, it depends on the individual. When they go back to think about it, they tend to feel, down, ashamed, and what's that. Also, our society would have told us that, and I've heard the argument many times online on social media about a woman versus a man, and goes back to the same bodies, that if a man have this amount of bodies, he's fine. A woman having this amount of bodies is bad.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's the same brain, it's the same experience, it's the same. Why is it that we are not teaching our men to also value themselves? We teach, why should a man why should a low value man have a high value woman? Let me put it like that. Correct, because then we need to teach both male and female. It's important to make the right sexual choices. And it should be their healthy sexual choices.
I agree with that. I think that, I am always in support of what people, the sexual choices and decisions that folks make. Once they are informed, once they are truly what they want, once they are, free of coercion and all of those things. So I am all for I am sexual liberation personified, right? And I think I encourage that for folks too. So I appreciate, you're bringing the double standard in, because that double standard is very real. And I think, the face and shape and look of relationships is changing too. Yeah. So a lot of people are choosing consensual non-monogamy. A lot of people are choosing some form of polygamy. A lot of people are choosing polyamory and open relationships and things like that. So some of them are not casual sex, because some of them involve actually establishing multiple romantic relationships. So they're different. But the people who do choose, it's okay for this relationship to be open, for you to have a one-night stand, or people who just
a whole different dynamic.
Yeah, people who just, or people who, and I think we will get to this with the possible benefits, but people who choose to not participate in monogamy. But one of the things that I was wondering about, like, as you talked about the drawbacks was, and you mentioned side chicks, like, I have heard some women say that they prefer to be side chicks because they prefer to avoid the responsibility, the commitment, the expectations, and all of those things. And, like, I say this all the time, like, as a chronically online person, and I think too there's like a movement against marriage and things like that, because the vision of marriage that you see, the way that marriage is sold, the way that marriage is talked about by people who are married, to me is all the more reason for people to participate in casual sex, because it's like, it seems like when you're in a relationship, especially heterosexual relationships, so relationships with men and women, that the women in those relationships take on the responsibility of cook, clean, sex giver, pleaser, this, everything. And, like, I could understand why people say, I prefer to be on this side, or why people say, I prefer to have just multiple casual sex encounters.
So, okay. So we're bringing in a lot of things, a lot of different variables, but nonetheless,
Yeah.
with the casual sex, it's a little bit different to the side chick, because, as I said, the side chick had started out as casual,
Yeah.
but now they are now in a committed relationship. Because the
A version of, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, right? But then it goes back to our view of what relationships are. And I think the media has played a tremendous role in forming the vision of what a marriage is, or a heterosexual relationship is, or committed relationship is. And it's a bit unfortunate because of who are the drivers behind the media that we are seeing. There are successful marriages out there, but we are not seeing them publicized and broadcast, but we are seeing the more so the dysfunctional ones. And that in itself, I think, is the narrative that is being pushed. It's I don't even want to say it's very liberal, because in a way, they are trying to, and I see it as trying to conform persons into now thinking in a particular way. So there's a shift happening, and I need for persons to also be mindful of that shift, because when we accept, and it goes back to, and I hear the side chicks that say, oh, I do not want the commitment, I don't want the responsibility. But there's a lot of responsibility that comes with a side chick.
Yeah.
Because you have to stay hidden. You have to be in the unknown. That it doesn't really add any value to you. Yes, you may get the rent paid or whatever, bills paid, but it doesn't really add any value. And mentally, over time, it does have that effect on you. So persons, and it's different to when we speak about a polygamous relationship, because all the parties involved know or have consented to, to whatever the lifestyle is. But here you are on the opposite side, like, I'm behind the door and nobody sees me. And people speak about February the 13th versus February the 14th, and it's like, it's not acceptable. Or the day after. Well, or the day after. But these also have mental drawbacks, because it does bring about emotional distress. Right? So to me, it's a deep hole. It's a deep hole to fall in.
I think it's really especially about being honest about what you want.
Correct.
And what you are actually able to accept, and really, truthfully looking at that, and not feeling like, okay, like, this is the best that I can do, or this is my lot in life, or whatever it is. If you, whatever kind of sex you choose, it's to, like, really be honest about
Correct. And
what's
sometimes
motivating
you.
you to be in certain positions and what's keeping you
Yeah.
to be there and stuff. Yeah.
So you said something there where it's important for you to be honest. It's important, and in being honest, it allows persons to make choices for themselves as well. So in communicating your truth, then it allows the other person to decide, hey, do I want to be a part of this or I don't?
Yeah.
So it's important not to rob persons of their choice.
Right.
Because when we are
Yes.
not honest, that is what happens, and then that's where hurt now comes in, because I was blindsided or short-sighted or totally just not included in the conversation.
Yeah, because you can also have, like, people can agree to casual sex but have different definitions of
Correct.
what that
Or
means
parameters for
too.
them.
Yeah, so it's like maybe one person's definition is the friends with benefits, which starts with friends for a reason, as in I want to be able to call you and tell you how my day went. I want to be able to call you and ask you, can you do this favor for me, or whatever it is, and sex is an added benefit. Or is like the not necessarily a one night stand, but like truly casual, as in there's no connection, platonic or otherwise, like or friendly or otherwise between us. So I want, when we see each other in public, that we act like we don't know each other. So when those two types of people end up in a situation, like, it's bound to be some problems and hurt feelings. So it's important for everybody to, like, talk about what it is they're looking to get out of this casual relationship, and if it's not, as you said, be honest, so that the other person is able to make decisions for themselves. Like, do I want to stay here? Like, tell me the truth, right?
That's true. And even when I was reading, it spoke about the same thing that we're speaking about now in terms of the truth. One part of having casual sex is that one person is often more powerful than the next. So you find that one person is more advantageous than the other. And then that is where tension or rifts begin to have, because it's not equal. In casual sex, if you're doing that over time, it's never an equal situation because of the whole wiring of the brain. Sometimes it's the female and sometimes it's the male, where that attachment now is being formed.
Yeah. This is not a good segue, and people don't usually say that. People usually say this is a good segue, but this is not a good segue. But you did want to cover some of the possible benefits of casual sex. So let's talk about that.
So
maybe the flip side of all of that. Yeah.
You're honing your sexual skills, different experiences, so you even learn yourself, right? It's a good way to reduce sex, not just casual sex, but sex on a whole. Helps to reduce sex. It increases self-confidence as well, because you're able to take power over something, right? And sexual exploration, that's another one. And then the satisfying part of having sex. So those are the benefits. But when we think about the benefits, and then we have to think about the implications, it makes us really sit to think and consider what our actions are going to be.
I think that's definitely important, because especially if you're not getting what you want to get out of a casual sex situation, like I mentioned, the investment in mutual pleasure, sometimes that's not
it's not there because that's not the plan, and that's why communication is important, because you may say, hey, you want us, and the other person, the person doesn't know you, know your needs,
right,
your wants.
and sometimes because sometimes there's not that trust that has been established in committed relationships to do certain things,
and then sometimes persons know you actually do the act, and then you end up, there was no agreement whether we're going to use protection or not. You end up with an STI or even a
baby.
Exactly. So these are also implications. They're not mental, but they are implications.
And conversations that definitely need to
but
to
sometimes
happen.
when it comes to casual sex, persons don't really have this
talk,
conversation.
right? Because it's like,
Because
people
guess
associate
what?
conversations
The more
with
you
commitment,
That's
feelings,
right.
relationships.
The
But
more you talk,
Yeah.
you're forging a relationship
Yeah.
right away.
it's I think it's really, really interesting. I feel like from what I've observed, it's definitely the assumption, and I think you mentioned it from like studies that women tend to,
Yeah, we want
build
talk.
emotional attachments, whereas men not so much. And I think people go into every casual sex relationship or casual sex situation with those ideas
Yeah,
in mind,
expectation.
even without not knowing the stats. The assumption is that, well, women are emotional, so they're gonna fall in love and they're gonna want to make a thing of this. It doesn't always
This happen,
but it's important for some way for you to have conversations, or if you can't have conversations, because one of the things that I noticed. No, one of the things I feel like you can find a way. You can say condom or no condom, like.
Yeah,
But
you can.
one of the things that I have noticed, right, and it comes back to like the honesty, is that people will notice the other person catching feelings or getting invested, and instead of saying, I don't think this is gonna work, they continue to have, continue to maintain that casual thing. And I think that, the other person is interpreting,
the action
this
is
means
like,
that
we're going
somewhere, and I see that happening, but that ain't got nothing to do with me. So
correct.
so do you think that, that person who notices that feelings are being caught has a responsibility to remove themselves, to say something, or should you just, because sometimes I think also it's like people think in a casual encounter is, I'm here for one thing, so however I get a one thing, we're talking consensually still.
Yeah.
Like,
Go back and they get it again.
so if the other person is taken advantage of in the process, if the other person is devastated and crushed in the process, too bad.
And you see, that is a very train of thought.
Yeah.
When you're going down the road of casual sex,
Like, you have to be prepared.
There's really no responsibility
of the other person to you.
You're responsible for you. I'm responsible for me. We are consenting to have sex, and that's it. And that is where it gets kind of murky, because after the act, no, there shouldn't be any feelings. There shouldn't be any intentions of wanting to have that conversation.
Yeah, they shouldn't give you a lift home. You should catch bus. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I'm just asking, like, but people have to agree.
They have to understand the risk, and that is where the distress comes in, because of your expectations, and your expectations are based on your past experiences. So if this is not in you, but mark you, there are some instances where, for example, a person who would have been sexually abused from a young age, they become promiscuous, and they just go about having sex with random persons. That's a trauma response. So that's totally different to the person that says, hey, you want to suck up tonight? There's still a difference, because there's no background to you wanting that. But some persons do have, they're more at risk to just having the sexual encounter. Right? Yeah. So we have to be mindful of that as well. So some persons do have an issue that they need to deal with that carries them down that path. So they do feel emptiness. So there's a void that needs to be filled, and it's not being filled. And some persons do go about having casual sex because they're seeking for that validation through sex, when sex very well may not be the answer for them.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely, worth people, like individuals, definitely like looking into it, reading up on or talking to other people who have had casual sex encounters about maybe what some of their experiences were. If you have in the past and you're thinking about doing it again, you look honestly about how you felt after, if there's anything that you would change about it. And maybe there is somebody who is looking for the same kind of casual sex that you are looking for. I feel like that's had find, but perhaps there is. But I think, you know, it's definitely sometimes the risk is
It's
greater
Yes.
than the reward. So
Yes.
that needs to be
Yeah,
looked
and
in.
even as we spoke about the male and female, we don't speak, and even engaging some of my clients and speaking to men who continuously have affairs. They're having casual sex. This is no side chick.
Yeah.
Because they're not a steady person, but having casual sex with other ladies, and they dig deep. They're also looking for a sense of validation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they're looking for something that they're not getting at home. But sex is the way they feel rewarded, because men respond to the touch.
Yeah.
And that's how they feel validated. So these are all things that we really do need to check into, and that is why mental health is it really needs attention, because we take it for granted and we do things without a proper explanation, and not being very conscious or self-aware of what we are doing. So it's important to search yourself and think a lot.
Yeah. Do you have any other final words?
Final words to those of you who are listening. We're in a culture now where sex is really selling. It's in the song, it's in the food, it's in everything. Everything
In
is
the food?
Everything is sexy. Everything is described as sexy, right? I want to let persons know that sex is a very powerful thing, and there are benefits to sex, and there are also implications to sex. And I'm speaking about consensual sex, and we have to be ready, prepared mentally to deal with both benefits, because they can become addictive to the point because you're enjoying it, not recognizing the implications of it. And then there are direct implications of it that can be also long term. So I want us to be very mindful of how we act when it comes to our sex life. Okay.
Yeah, that's, I think, a good way to wrap this conversation up. And I think I would just add that, you know, we've talked about multiple types of people, you know, and I think different mental health states,
Yeah.
you know. So I think the key message for me is, like, still to be honest about your values, who you are, what you want,
Your expectations.
your expectations from partners, whether they are casual or committed ones, and, you know, not to go along with something because you're trying to please the other person, or because sometimes you go along with the thing in the hope that something will change. So
potential.
yeah, like, or like, you know, that there's potential for a relationship. So and I can't excuse myself from that, because I feel like, oh gosh, I didn't mean that. But, you know, like, I feel like there are so many of us who have, like, gone through that.
Yes, correct.
Instead of maybe, like, taking a pause and thinking through why you are choosing certain parts, why we are trying to do certain things, what it is we are trying to get out of it, like getting to the root of what it is we desire and want, and really assessing if the way that we are going about it is the best way to, or the only way to get those things that we want. So sometimes you're craving, you know, intimacy, sometimes you're craving connection, and you might think, okay, that's the only way that you can get it. But maybe it's for, you know, a shift to different types of intimacy. Maybe you need to, or maybe it's like surrounding yourself with other types of relationships and communities and stuff. Maybe it's establishing a relationship with a therapist to work through some of those things, because, you know, you want to make sure that when you do decide to enter into whatever relationship, casual or committed, that you are fully informed, fully aware, and fully choosing that with all of the knowledge, all of the insight, all of the, I think, clarity.
Correct.
To really face not just the implications, but also fully experience the benefits, because you also want to be, like, fully ready to enjoy whatever it is you're getting into. And sometimes if you know, you haven't worked through some things, the thing that in front of you, you can't even fully enjoy it. So it's important, you know, to reflect on those things, and I support whatever relationship people choose, and I want you to truly choose those relationships to ensure that you are getting your pleasure, that you are not being denied pleasure, that you are asserting yourself, that you are communicating your needs, that you are in a space where you can communicate your needs and have those needs respected and honored. So consider all of that, you know, like whenever you're deciding whatever you decide, and those would be my final words to you. Thank you as usual for being here. I look forward to the next conversation with you whenever that is and whatever the topic. And thank you all for joining us on this Tuesday evening. It was a pleasurable conversation, and remember, you know, this space is one that's inclusive and no topic is too big or too small. We really talk about everything here. So if you have suggestions for topics and you see, I think, either of us on the streets, let us know and we'll work it in. And I hope you all have a pleasurable evening and stay safe, and I will see you all next Tuesday. Bye.